And start recording. So, Tina, welcome. So excited to have you.
Oh,
You
thank
have
you, Amy.
you
I,
have
I,
been on a whirlwind tour the past few weeks with your kicks and in excess. So,
I have, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Really, it's just so wonderful to connect with the fans, and they tell me wonderful stories, more stories about Michael, of meeting him, and I've met a lot of people to do with the TBI. So many people have said to me, have thanked me, and I have to thank you. You're the one that alerted me to the whole thing.
it's
Yeah.
still so surreal. I just remember you emailing me um, that you had read my HuffPost piece and that was what kind of connected the dots for you.
Hmm.
It's just, the internet is so powerful. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wonderful, isn't it? I mean, when you think how things have changed. I mean, if it were, I don't know, 20 years ago or something, I wasn't even on the internet then. So, you know, I had to be taught. Somebody actually, well, actually, Michael got me a computer. He gave me a surprise in around, well, 97, and he arranged for me to have a computer at my home. I was actually outside of LA with him, and when I got back there, it was. And but I didn't know what to do with it. All I was doing was I was just sending emails. I didn't know you could do anything else with it. Silly. Yeah.
Wow. So, Tina, um, take us through a little bit of Michael's accident. I believe it was 92. Um,
Mhm.
take us a little bit through that. Like at the time, I'm actually really impressed that the doctors knew back then to tell you that he had a TBI. Um, but that was really all they told you.
No, they didn't tell me.
Oh, I thought they
No,
did. I thought they
no.
did say that.
No, what happened was, so he, with his, well, when he was examined, I mean, after death, the coroner wrote a 30-page report. Well, that's not something that the family usually goes through. I mean, we know he took his life and how he took his life. We weren't sure, we didn't know why. And we didn't know that the bump on the head had anything to do with it. But we didn't know how bad it was then. It was later when actually I was talking with Richard Lowenstein, who said that he'd given them the last page, the 30th page, and the person he gave it to was an expert in TBIs, and she said right away, you know, you don't know how to read this, but I can see it right here. Michael was living with a TBI. The fracture on the back of his head did all of that, and it was only a matter of time before he would take his life because he wasn't being treated the way we would treat someone now. Um, he was just getting Prozac. And I think you mentioned that that's what the doctors wanted to do
Mhm.
with you. So then when I kind of mulled that over and I went back and forth. And when I read your wonderful feature in Huffington Post, it just went pow. I mean, my head nearly blew off when I saw that because I recognized everything then. So it's actually a shame that we really didn't know enough about. He had been told that he had um, some brain damage, which scared the heck out of him. I mean, those words just put in that context without any sign of this is what it means, this is what you must watch or anything like that, must have been extremely scary for Michael. And I think that's why he he didn't talk about it. And, you know, maybe if it had happened, um, more like 10 years later than that, somebody would have done something about it. It's kind of a shame. But I think with somebody like Michael, um, people would take more notice. You have wonderful things going on in the TBI Association. You do amazing work. I know you travel, you give out awards, and you're just constantly in touch with people, and it's wonderful the things you do. And so it's teaching people, and it's too bad it didn't come along sooner, but you were too young then.
Mhm.
You right, but I'm just so grateful for all the information you give me over time, so that I can get the word out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, at the time of his accident, um, I, yeah, let's see, what was that, 92? I was still in high school. Um,
Yeah.
but at the time of his accident, afterwards, you and family and bandmates, you started noticing changes in Michael. Uh,
Mm.
would you talk a little bit about that?
Well, with Michael, the changes were, um, his personality changed very, very definitely so. He'd always been so easygoing, just a very easygoing guy, just wanted everybody to be happy. He was a pretty happy guy. And he began to complain about things and not be as easygoing, well, do you want to go here for dinner? You usually like this restaurant. No, I'm right off that restaurant now. I don't even think I feel like going out now. That just wasn't Michael.
Mhm.
Just little things like that. And I also noted that when I look back on it, not at the time, but when I look back on it, he began to wear dark glasses on stage. And
Sure.
you told me about that, the lighting, you
Yeah.
know, and but at the time we didn't think about it, and I believe the band thought he was being a bit full of himself because he wasn't as happy. He didn't happily go along with things the way he had before. He was speaking up for himself more, but in a different way. And I think, yeah, I mean, they didn't know about it. They didn't know what it meant, and neither did we. So that's just a shame.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine, having gone through what I went through. I can't even begin to fathom getting on a stage with loud roaring crowd, the music, the band playing, the
Mhm.
lights flashing, and then having to actually perform on top of it all. Like, I
Mhm.
just can't even comprehend. And he just did it. He had no choice. He didn't know any different, right?
Right.
And I mean, it just had to have been so exhausting to him, and not knowing why, right? Like, I mean, he knew that he'd had this injury and this accident, but I'm sure he never made the connection,
No.
just as you didn't, because nobody was giving him any of the information or the tools. I mean, even with that information now, who knows? We would like to think he would have had the best medical care, but even with the best care, I just can't comprehend. Look at NFL players; they just keep playing through it. I'm sure he, as a
Mhm.
rock star, would have kept playing through it.
Well, yes, he had a very strong work ethic, and even in times before that, when he wasn't feeling well, when his voice was going, he still carried on. He had. I remember when he came back to Australia after the 18-month long kick tour, he'd lost his voice. and he started getting injections. He was in so much pain, but he felt he had to move on. He never felt like he could be different from the other guys. Well, they could play their instruments, but their instruments weren't human instruments. With
Mhm.
Michael, it's hard walking up to a microphone almost every night for 18 months. There was no break in that. And no, he got painkillers, and he went on and finished the shows in Australia. And so, part of it is, yeah, he was a good guy. He didn't want to complain. Um, so when I heard the band complaining after he died and saying that, well, he was hard to get along with, I just realized they just didn't understand what was going on with him.
Mhm.
And he was obviously very afraid because, as you said, you can also lose the ability to remember words sometimes. I mean, and I realize I'm looking back at some of the videos from live performances, he was forgetting some words from his own lyrics.
Right.
That must have been just so frightening for him. And I'm so sad that he went through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I know Christabel Braden is a young woman. She had her brain injury at 14, and she's now a singer, songwriter, musician. And occasionally she will forget how the song starts and have to start over again because she's forgotten the words.
Really.
I just, can't even imagine in his situation what that must have been like. And, the personality changes and the band thinking that, oh, he's just getting full of himself, it's going to his head. I absolutely can see how all of that, that's without knowing what was actually going on with him. I can see that that's absolutely what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I see that just amongst people in my group who their family, technically knows what's going on, but they still don't get it, right? Like, what do you mean you don't want to go out tonight? You said yesterday that we were going to go out tonight. Well, I've changed my mind now. Now I don't want to go out. Like anxiety creeps in, and that self isolation. And it sounds like that's a lot of what Michael had been going through.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I remember being very angry with the band after Michael died, and I felt like they weren't standing up for him, you know. And then after I read your piece, and after I thought about it, and I watched some more video of his interacting with the band, and I realized, I mean, he was afraid. He didn't say anything to them because he didn't really know what was going on. Um, and they were thinking, well, yeah, he's kind of up himself. And so it was a terrible situation. It was sad. um, I Gosh, if it happened in 92, so if it had been maybe even 8 years later, probably things would have been different. But
And also, he was in Italy, correct? That was where the accident happened?
Denmark.
Denmark.
Yeah. um, right. And he was with Helena.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, in watching the movie, Richard Lowenstein's movie, Mystify, was the first time that I found out that Helena knew about it all the time, but he'd sworn her to secrecy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Um, since you just brought that up, I don't want to forget. So, Mystify will be in the theaters
Mm-hmm.
in the US January
7th.
7th.
One night only, January 7th, across the country. And you must go and get tickets now because You just go to Fandango or
Mhm.
one of those, and there are different sites showing you exactly where to go, and um, just get your tickets now, because if not enough people sign up, it's possible they'll pull it out on certain theaters, and I don't want them to happen. I want people to really see what happened to Michael, and because it can help so many people. You reach many, many people. I know you do. I watch your stuff, and yeah, no, you're wonderful. But with Michael, with a name like that, so many people recognize his name. They're more likely to read about it.
Yeah,
That's the way I
I
feel.
agree. I agree. And I'm so, it's amazing just in the little bit I've shared of your book, and you've been on my podcast and whatnot. And so many people, particularly people a little bit older than me, that were huge fans of In Excess, and they had absolutely no idea he ever had a TBI.
Mm.
Which how would they? He hit it
Yeah,
just like you said.
exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah.
now the movie does touch on that, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the part of telling his full, true story. And Richard was the first one to get Helena to talk about it. She was only 21 at the time. I certainly
Yeah.
don't blame her. She was just a kid herself. He had asked her not to even tell her parents because he was scared.
He
Um,
didn't wanna lose his career, I'm sure.
exactly. I
It
mean, there
had
he
to have been.
was. Right. I mean, it was tough anyway because in the 90s, In Excess's popularity had gone down some anyway. It had been a little while since the Kick album, um, and there were some divisions in the band because Michael wanted to move on and get some new sounds. He said he didn't want to keep singing the same songs. He kept writing all the time, so it was hard for him he was always looking for new stuff. I mean, you can't in any industry just sit where you are,
Yeah, yeah,
especially in the music industry. So, it wasn't really a happy time, but he still didn't want to let them down as far as, forgetting words or saying he can't go on tour. So, yeah. So Mystify definitely tells the whole story on that. Helena, in her own words, does that. And I'm so grateful to her that she's done that. Um, and other people around him spoke a little about, the changes that came with that. So in so many ways, it's reclaiming his, what would you say, his honor or something,
yeah,
because some terrible things were written about him when he died, especially by, well, the British press and that kind of thing. So it's so good to get the word out there and explain to people who he really was. Richard was able to do that because he knew him so well and had so much film on him, things that people have never seen before, just private film.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Tina, as you had started writing the book,
Yeah.
before you found my article, correct?
Yes. Hmm.
So, did that kind of change the trajectory of the book in a small capacity?
It did, definitely, because I was trying to explain what I saw in him, but I didn't have anybody who really knew about it. So when that article popped up, and I mean, it had been written, well, didn't you write it in 2005 or something?
2015.
15. Okay, yeah. I knew it was before I got onto the whole thing. I did see somewhere about traumatic brain injury, but it wasn't telling me anything. And so I just put it in, Googled it in, and your name popped up with HuffPost. And I said, wow, this woman knows what she's talking about. You know, because you explained it in layman's terms. I mean, you could say directly from the heart what it did to you. So it almost made me happy. You know what I mean? Just to know, to get it validated and know and realize that's what was wrong. Because when I was speaking to him, well, 5 nights before he took his life, he called me. He was leaving LA. So he called me and to say goodbye. And one of the things he said is, I don't want to do this tour. I don't think I can finish this tour. And I said, well, you know, Michael, you don't have to. You've given 20 years. I hear all the time that people put off certain dates, you know, in the movie and just in the musical industry, to say, you know, they're not well. You know, some people go to rehab. Some people aren't well for something else. You're not well. Tell them to move them up to, you know, March or April. Get yourself well. But of course, he still wouldn't be well then, because I didn't know what it was. But he didn't really know either. He just knew that he was having these troubles. And what he was really fighting was the fact that he was lonely for his little baby. And Tiger Lily she was just about 14. No, how old was she? Yes, maybe she was almost 14 months, I think. Yeah, because she'd had her first birthday at my house in July. And so when he passed, yeah, she was about 14 months. And he felt like he desperately wanted to see her. If he had to be on the road, he at least wanted to have her there. It just meant a lot to him. He just felt that would make him feel good. And I'm sure it would have. But sadly, when he called London, he waited up all night, and he had been drinking with friends, and his friends, he was waiting for this phone call to say, for Paula to tell him that she would come with Tiger Lily, because he'd left the tickets there. She was supposed to leave that night from London. And there was really no reason why she couldn't have left. But she wanted her other girls to come with her. But their father, Bob, had said they can be there for Christmas Day, but he wouldn't allow them to come out of school early, before December. Well, this was November. So he refused to let them come, and she refused to leave without them. I don't know. I mean, if you know, in her in her statement to the police, she said that last phone call, he said he was desperate to see Tiger. He felt he really needed to see Tiger. Please get on that flight. Well, I don't know how anybody who professes to love somebody couldn't get on that flight. I couldn't do that. I would have to be on that flight. So I don't know what was going on, but that was all he needed to hear, that he was not going to see her. His next phone call, his last phone call, was to Bob Geldof. And nobody really knows. I mean, Bob wouldn't speak to the police, but he put his statement out through his attorney. And his attorney just said that it was a very strange statement, because it was a conversation verbatim, you know, with Bob being very, very practical. And Michael, as Bob said it, was unreasonable. But, you know, just 4 weeks before this, maybe less than, Michael had had a, a meeting with Bob, a one-on-one meeting with Bob and Paula. And he told Bob he needed to see his little child, Tiger Lily, and would it be possible if Bob's two younger children could come to Australia a little earlier because he would be on tour. But the whole family was having Christmas there that year, and he'd really like Peaches and little Pixie to be there too. So could they leave school 2 weeks before the end? Now, there were little children then. But Bob said yes, and then Bob called the a child psychologist, the courtside child psychologist, who said no. So he broke the news to Michael, and then Michael got just a little crazy on it, you know. That was like the straw that broke the back.
Yeah.
And with the TBI, he couldn't handle it, you
Mm.
know. And at another time, as you've explained in your books, he could have handled it.
Right.
And nobody knew he was dealing with that, but he couldn't handle it.
And then, you mentioned he'd been drinking, and
Uh-huh.
we're
Up all
learning
night.
more and more about alcohol and its effects on the brain and brain injury. And so I can only imagine that kind of exasperated everything he was already feeling.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and
So,
it's,
Tina, I'm going to read the quote. You have a quote from my piece in your book. And by the way, it's quite exciting to be quoted in a book of this caliber. It's the only book I've been quoted in that I know of. um, I have felt an entire spectrum of emotions: anger, rage, fear, sadness, depression, hope, joy, frustration, contentment. I struggle in crowded restaurants or shopping malls. I cannot handle stimulation from multiple sources, including light, sound, and vibration. I grab for words that seem to have disappeared into thin air. My personality has changed, and I am aware of my mood swings. I have anxiety and panic attacks. And so I can see how reading that, especially the line about light, sound, and vibration,
yes.
I can see how that completely like clicked it for you. Like, oh my
Oh,
gosh.
yeah. I mean, that was his life every night. The lights, the sound, the audience, lots of people. Yeah. So, and it really did. It was just amazing. Like a light bulb went off. And I was grateful because at least then I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was so incredibly thrilled that you reached out to me, and, it's developed into a beautiful friendship with you. And it was so exciting to finally meet you when I was out in California this past fall or spring, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and so you also wrote this with Jen Jewel Brown.
Yes.
And can you just tell us a little bit about Jen?
Yes, Jen is she's an amazing writer. She taught me to write. She really did. And thank goodness she did, because we ended up with Alan and Unwin, who decided they wanted the book before it was finished. They gave us just 5 months to finish, which is not a lot, as you know, it's not a lot of time
No.
on a book like this. And she and what we did was, actually, Jen said to me, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're starting from the beginning. We're not going to put anything in it that we had before in your other book. And because that's what Ellen and Unwin wanted. They just wanted completely new stuff. And she said, I'll write this chapter, you write the next. I'll write the next, you write the next. And it was great because with 24 hours in a day, she's in Australia. I wrote, and worked for 12 hours, sent my stuff to her. She wrote and worked and sent. So we knew what each of us were writing. And that was great, you know. Every other chapter was one of mine. And she, you know, she's a wonderful writer. She writes about music. She's been doing this for, my gosh, maybe over 20 years. So the richness she brought to this book was that she knew all the people that Michael had worked with, the record producers and videographers and people like this, and plus all of the Australian music groups that I didn't really know. I know of them, but I left Australia quite young. I've been living in the United States. So I couldn't really, you know, write about that. And that's what, you know, it just brings so much richness to the book. And I'm just so grateful to her. Her first, the first time she wrote about Michael, and I'd always kept this, it's interesting because I'd always kept this review. I never knew someday I would meet Jen, but it was wonderful. But I remember she started it off. Um, he stepped up to the microphone and his powerful voice came through you know, it just filled the room. And she said, you know, he's such a natural, and I think he's going to go a long way. And,
Wow.
you know, that was when he was 17.
Wow.
I know. And I was so impressed with that. And she then, around 2015, she called me and she wanted to interview me for a book that she was contributing to, all about rock music in Australia. She wanted to write it on, well, she'd been asked to write it on Max Q, which is an album that Michael put out with Ollie Olson, completely separate from In Excess. And it's a marvelous album. If you ever get the chance, you must try to find this album, Max Q. The music is very different, great lyrics, and it got an amazing review when it first came out with Rolling Stone over here. Well, anyway, so she interviewed me and I remembered her name. So when I was starting to write this, I thought, I'll check out if maybe she'll help me edit it. And that's how we started. She started editing. And I thought she brings so much to it. You know, she's teaching me so much. She'd say, you know, what did it feel like when you first walked into the villa? That's what people want to know. These kind of things. So I left school when I was 15, my 15th birthday. And so obviously I don't have that kind of
Wow.
writing, you know, but I remember all through school, my teachers would always say, you know, you you only get good marks in math and writing compositions. So, you know, you're not going to get anywhere that way.
No. And here you are now.
Yeah. Well, they told Michael, the teachers constantly told Michael that he was a dreamer.
Yeah.
He would bring his report card home, you're a dreamer. And, you know, he's not going to make anything with his poetry. You can't get anywhere with poetry.
Surprise.
Yeah. So, but no, I'm just so grateful to you. I just can't tell you, Amy. I mean, I know I've told you many times, and I just can't stop it because, yeah, I know you help so many people, and with this book is helping people, and it won't be
Absolutely.
written other than for you. I'm telling you right now.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm telling you.
Um, and I made a note to make sure I help promote Mystify and getting people to get their tickets. I know I had looked it up and it's at numerous theaters near me. I was surprised. I thought it
Mm,
would only maybe be at the Mall of America, but
mm.
there's quite a few of them throughout the Twin Cities. So
Yes.
definitely I want to go see it.
Yeah, it's going to be in almost 700 cities around the country, so you've got to be able to find it somewhere.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So amazing.
yeah.
Well, Tina, is there anything, any final thoughts you want to leave everyone with? I know we have one book club member from Australia,
Uh-huh.
Danny. She was super excited because he was a really big deal in Australia. He was a big deal here, but an even bigger deal in Australia. So she's
Yeah.
really excited to watch this.
Oh,
Um,
good.
are there any final words you'd like to leave everyone with?
Well, I just want people to be kind to each other and ask about each other. How are you doing? And really try to, if your friend doesn't seem of good sorts, if you're out of sorts and they just seem off kilter, I would say, talk to them about it, because you never know what people are carrying inside. Always approach with kindness. I think that's all I can do. And spread the word. Spread the word.
And you are truly one of the kindest people, Tina. I've just so enjoyed getting to know you and your
I love you,
passion.
Amy.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh.
and your passion, with this book and the interviews you give. I know every once in a while I get a Google alert that I've been mentioned in an interview that you've given, and I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Um, so, Tina, thank you so much.
You're
And
very welcome.
I really hope everyone has enjoyed reading this book. Um, and what I really appreciated is that it's slightly bigger font. I really appreciate
Oh, yeah.
it.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I would say, could I just also
Yeah.
ask if, anybody who has read the book, please go to Amazon and review, because that's the way people, when they see good
Yes.
reviews, that's when they'll pick it up. And it really, the underlying thought is, just let people know, just
Mhm.
tell people about this. And it's so easy, with Michael's name, to get the word out, I think, and your name. And so, yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
glad people are enjoying it.
And that's a great reminder about the Amazon review. I do like to remind everyone to go on Amazon and review the book. You did not have to purchase it on Amazon to review it, but you do have to have an Amazon account. So if you have an Amazon account, please do hop on and leave a review um, for the book for Tina. That's always so appreciated. And just a reminder to everyone, our next book begins in January. See if I can get it in here. Love You Hard by Abby Maslin. This one's a little bit different. This one's from a caregiver's point of view. So looking
How
forward.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I have to get that one.
So just the brief synopsis, they lived in Washington, D.C. He was walking home from a Capitals game, which is their baseball team, and he was beaten. They stole his phone and practically beat him to death. And he was found on someone's porch the next morning. And, you can imagine where the story goes from there. So
Wow.
they had a young family, and she was a school teacher, and she started brain school with him for his rehab. So it's a very heartwarming book.
Oh, how wonderful. I have to get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Tina, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone in the book club. This has just been so enjoyable. I hope you guys are all enjoying all of the books, and I look forward to exploring January with you all.
Thank you.